Hello everyone, this is David from Automotive Press. As you know, one of the most exciting events this year was the introduction of the 2022 Toyota Tundra. However, I also think the debut of the 2023 Toyota Sequoia is just as exciting and perhaps even more inspirational because that thing looks even better than the Tundra. And for the longest time, I was trying to figure out whether to buy the Tundra or wait for the Sequoia because many of you guys said, forget the Tundra, buy the Sequoia. However, after going through my own analysis, I decided that I'm not going to wait for the Sequoia and buy the Tundra because the Tundra TRD Pro is coming very soon. In fact, it's arriving in about 3 weeks' time. And what I decided to do is to wait a few more months, maybe even 6 months, and then when the Sequoia TRD Pro comes available, because I do have a deposit on it, then trade up from the Tundra to Sequoia. That way I get to experience both. So that's what I decided to do. But while doing my research, I realized that there are some really key differences between the Tundra and Sequoia, despite the fact that they share so many components. But what I want to do today is to point out 10 key differences between the Tundra and the Sequoia. Yes, I know one is a pickup truck and one is a SUV, but there are some important differences that you might not recognize. So let me point them out to you so that perhaps you can decide whether it's better to buy the Tundra or to wait for the Sequoia to arrive. Let's get right into it. Welcome back. So what are the key differences between the Tundra and Sequoia? Well, the first one is very obvious. One is a pickup truck and one is SUV. But a lot of people cross-shop between the pickup truck and SUV. So sometimes even that difference is something you have to think about. So for example, a lot of people think that they need a pickup truck because they need to haul something or put something like, I don't know, garden supplies or fishing supplies in the back. And they automatically assume they need a pickup truck when perhaps the Sequoia, which is an SUV, can do 99% of everything a pickup truck can do. Perhaps it might get a little bit messy in the back if you're putting some outdoor equipment or some messy stuff in the back, but who cares? You can clean that up. So yes, one is a pickup truck and one is SUV, but for the most part, you can actually share the same kind of responsibility and functionality because you can do almost everything with a pickup truck that you can do with SUV and vice versa. Again, it's kind of up to you to decide that, but that's my first point. The second point is also important, and that is that Sequoia only comes in the hybrid version. So the Sequoia has the 3.4-liter twin-turbo V6 with a hybrid system, whereas with the Tundra, you have two choices. You can get the normal non-hybrid 3.4 twin-turbo or 3.4 twin-turbo with the hybrid, just like a Sequoia. So what does that mean? Well, it simply means that the base Sequoia compared to base Tundra has a fair amount of difference in power and torque because Sequoia is the hybrid version which has much more increased power and torque. So that's point number 2. Point number 3 is an interesting one because most people assume that the Tundra and Sequoia are about the same size just because Sequoia is based on Tundra. Now that assumption is mostly correct in terms of the width and the height, but when it comes to length, you might be surprised that the Sequoia is much shorter than even the shortest Tundra. Now, depending on which variation of the Tundra you buy, the length is quite different, but let's assume for a moment you pick something like a crew cab, which is what I would buy because that's what the Tundra TRD Pro comes in. Compared to the Sequoia, well, it's almost 3 feet shorter for the Sequoia. So for those of you who have a tight parking space or you can't quite fit the Tundra into your garage, you might be happy to hear that the Sequoia is quite a bit shorter, although it's not any narrower and it's about the same height as a Tundra. So that's point number 3. Point number 4 is also quite important because a Sequoia is going to be quite a bit more expensive than the Tundra, mainly because the Sequoia only comes in hybrid and therefore the price is already bumped up. But traditionally speaking, the Sequoia has always been more expensive than Tundra, so you might want to take that into account before deciding because you could get a sticker shock when comparing a similarly equipped Tundra to a Sequoia. The price difference will be quite a bit more than you think. The fifth difference between the Tundra and Sequoia is an interesting one. Because we no longer get the Land Cruiser in North America, the Sequoia is the closest thing you can buy that is still related to the Land Cruiser. They both share the same TNGA-F platform and more or less the same chassis and suspension, and basically they are actually quite close to each other. Even though Tundra is also related to the Land Cruiser in terms of the basic powertrain and the platform, because Tundra is a pickup truck and the Sequoia is a SUV, in terms of driving feel and the character and the overall environment, the Sequoia is going to feel a lot more like a bigger version of the Land Cruiser than the Tundra. So if you miss the Land Cruiser, or if you're the type of person who always wanted to buy the Land Cruiser, well, Sequoia is really the only way, unless you want to pay top dollars to buy the Lexus LX, which is literally identical to the Land Cruiser. So the fifth reason is a very interesting one, as I mentioned, and that is that the Sequoia is probably a closer relationship with the Land Cruiser than the Tundra. So if you like the Land Cruiser, you're going to like Sequoia better than the Tundra. The sixth reason why the Sequoia is different from Tundra is the fact that there's additional weight in the rear because it's got a full cab, of course, which means the Sequoia is going to ride quite differently than Tundra. They both share very similar components across the board, but because the Sequoia has a full SUV design, and because of the difference in terms of the weight and the overall structural rigidity, it's obviously going to feel a little bit more stable and a little bit more comfortable on the highway compared to pickup truck style like a Tundra. Any kind of pickup style, if there isn't enough weight in the back, it's going to feel a little bit bumpy and a little bit restless, especially at a higher speed, as we have witnessed in the new Tundra. But with the Sequoia, again, because of the SUV design, it's going to feel a little bit more settled down, a little bit more hunkered down, and therefore I think the overall ride and the comfort will be better than the Tundra. The seventh reason is somewhat personal and subjective, but I truly think that the Sequoia looks better than the Tundra in terms of the front design. The rest of the body, in terms of wheels and the basic side profile, looks very similar between the two, and the interior is virtually identical. But the front end is different because the Sequoia has a smaller grille, and that looks a little bit more integrated compared to Tundra, which has this kind of mustache look that we all talk about. And because the grille is so big and so much in your face, you do get used to it, but it still looks a little bit odd to many of us. And so I think the Sequoia looks better, is cleaner looking, more like a Land Cruiser design than a truck design. So I love the Sequoia front end. So what else is there in terms of difference between Tundra and Sequoia? Well, the eighth difference is to do with the resale value, and this time it's in favor of the Tundra. Because traditionally speaking, pickup trucks always have better resale value than the SUV, and that is particularly true of Tundra compared to Sequoia. Now, that might be a bit of an unfair comparison because if you compare the old Sequoia to old Tundra, the Tundra was way more popular, so obviously it had much better resale value. But who knows, maybe this time around the Sequoia will pick up popularity because of the great design, and maybe the resale value will go up as well. But at the end of the day, there's going to be always some difference, and I would say the Tundra will likely get better resale value than the Sequoia, even some years down the road. The ninth factor you're going to notice in terms of difference between the Tundra and Sequoia is that they're going to produce more Tundra than Sequoia, and therefore the availability for Tundra will be better. So if you're waiting for, let's say, a Sequoia TRD Pro, you could be waiting for a very long time, whereas if you're trying to buy the Tundra TRD Pro, you will have a better chance just because there are more of them allocated. In fact, because the Tundra have more variation in terms of models and trims, if you're not super picky about exact model you want, it's definitely going to be easier to find the Tundra than the Sequoia. So the ninth difference is that the Tundra have more volume available compared to Sequoia, and therefore, in addition to having a better resale value, it's going to be easier to find the allocation or the model you want if you're selecting Tundra compared to Sequoia. Now, a few years down the road, maybe Sequoia will really pick up the sales, and they might even increase the number of different models, and perhaps at some point the availability of tundra and sequoia could be very similar, but for the next few years, it's going to be easier to find tundra than the sequoia. The 10th difference between the tundra and sequoia is the fact that the sequoia may have less problems and teething issues than tundra in the first year of production, because the tundra had to go first and therefore it struggled and suffered from some minor quality issues, and even turbo wastegate issue came up. But sequoia, being the second model to come out from the same production line and also sharing the same kind of components with the tundra, would have been able to apply what they learned from tundra to sequoia. So the engineers, the production people, and suppliers would have had chance to fix things and to work out the solutions for the sequoia production when compared to the tundra production. So more than likely, the sequoia production will go smoother, perhaps less problem, and I don't think, for example, we will see a wastegate issues with the sequoia, because they would have resolved that already during the tundra production. So the 10th and the final reason is perhaps the sequoia will be better built and it will have less issues in the beginning than the tundra. Maybe a few years down the road, it wouldn't matter anymore because both models would have been up and running properly and they would have resolved all these issues. But for the first year to year and a half, the sequoia will likely be better built. So I hope you enjoyed this video, which talk about 10 differences between the tundra and sequoia. Some of it is advantageous for sequoia, and some of it is actually in favor of tundra. It looks like there are more things that are in favor of a sequoia than tundra, but only you can decide what is right for you, because each one of you have a different criteria and different requirements in terms of ownership. So let me know in the comments below if you noticed anything else that's different between the sequoia and tundra, or any other comments to do with tundra or sequoia. Would love to hear from you. And please comment and give me a thumbs up if you can. And also, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. That would be very much appreciated. But until next video, I'm signing off for now. Thank you so much.